Hello and welcome. My name is Meepolis, they, he, she, and today we are looking at and talking about Ramshackle, a Yellowknife story by Alison McCreesh and published by Conundrum Press in the long-away time of 2015. I picked this volume up after Comic Crack talked about it and because I haven't been able to get my hands on Kate Beaton's new book, Ducks, yet. Content notes for nudity, sex, and use of the term, quote, bottom of the totem pole, which, to my understanding, is a combination of misunderstanding totem poles and appropriation. Clicking over to her portfolio website, McCreesh describes herself thusly, quote, for over a decade now, Alison McCreesh has called Yellowknife home. Since first making her way north in 2008, Alison has traveled extensively throughout northern Canada and the Arctic and has spent time around the circumpolar world. Through her fiber-based art, illustrations, sketchbooks, and comics, Alison documents and explores the contemporary North. Her work dwells on Northern identity, the reality and the challenges, as well as the quirks and the humor. End quote. She's also apparently the creative behind another book I DNF'd a couple years ago, and that might change. Maybe I'll go check it out again. What kinds of keywords came to mind reading this book? Nonfiction, community, housing shortage, class, and the North. The summary over on Goodreads is, quote, over the past decade, the North, or at least the idea of it, has slowly made its way back to our consciousness, a notion that the North is synonymous with a lawless, rugged freedom. But at first glance, Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, is actually a somewhat disappointing modern capital city. There are tall buildings, yoga pants, a Walmart, and a lot of government jobs. Nonetheless, if you dig a little deeper, you do find that alternative off-grid reality. Barely 5 minutes from the downtown core, wedged between million-dollar houses, you'll find little shacks where people exist without running water and use honey buckets for toilets. When Alison McCreesh moved from Quebec to Yellowknife, she quickly fell in love with the quirky ways in which it seemed possible to live up north. Part travelogue, part comic book, part love story, and part guide to the north and its quirky inhabitants, Ramshackle spends her first summer north of 60. End quote. Flipping to the foreword, McCreesh shares that, quote, Ramshackle is based on these autobiographical comic snapshots from our first summer in Yellowstone. I have redrawn them and retroactively added context where necessary, but they remain pretty true to what was most striking to us when we first moved north. End quote. Looking at the art and wordiness, this is a very word-heavy book, but generally broken down in a way that is fairly digestible, although I did find a few places a bit hard to figure out the order of dialogue boxes initially. The art was really appealing, and I liked how the color palette shifted throughout. And before we switch over to representation and diversity talk, unlike most books I read, this one definitely felt very focused on place, although I do feel like McCreesh could have leaned into it even more. The other thing that the book seemed largely focused on was class. I would have liked to know a bit more about McCreesh's class, and I wouldn't have minded a bit more information about what other people did for work and the quality of that work. But otherwise, she does center cheaper lifestyles in Yellowknife, and I appreciate that. Gender wasn't really explored, but was certainly part of McCreesh's perspective. Similarly, race wasn't overtly explored and perhaps felt a bit blurred and undefined. That said, sort of a tangent, to that, there was some interesting discussion in the introduction about McCreesh's choice to originally publish this book in English, as she mostly worked with francophones. Sexuality and ability felt fairly ignored as far as I can remember. Overall, a pretty solid 4-star. Bye y'all, keep reading, and organized end capitalist oppression. And as always, Literally Graphic is created on land that should be given back to the traditional landholders, which in this case is, to my knowledge, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, non-Anishinaabe people, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat Nation.